for what you've presented so far. I've got a question around. I think you mentioned how while you were still new in your career, you were open to seeing or understanding what the other teams around you were doing, so that you could sort of grow. I'm just interested with like the time and the workload that you had at that stage. How did you manage finding time to sort of learn what the others are doing around?
Yeah, so look, most companies, when you walk into the company as a graduate, it's actually understood. And what you'll see is if you have a graduate program, your graduate program will make allowance for you spending time with other departments. So like your first 2 months or so, you find that you sit in your department, but you spend this day or this week with survey, especially those that are very, very interlinked with what you do. So they normally give you an opportunity to spend time with them, because when you go out in the field, so think of it from as a geologist at a production mine. When I go out to a field and I want my rig to drill a hole, it is survey who has to stake that hole using their GPSs. So it means that conversation already has to happen. So those relationships are strongly interlinked, and it wouldn't make sense any other way but to give you an opportunity to build those relationships. So if a company does not give you that opportunity, it's going to have to be something that you learn on the go, but you will have that opportunity because there are certain functions where you'll be asking for help from those departments, and if the relationships don't exist, you're going to start to see where there's a gap.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. I joined the meeting only later because I was somewhere, but I got there at a good time where you were talking about health issues, because I'm kind of acutely arthritic due to like calcium deficiencies and stuff. So when I was happy when you spoke about geology as a field, considering health issues, because I had a conversation with my brother earlier on this year, and he said I might have to like study until like maybe PhD level, so that I can stay away from the field due to those health issues. But I'm quite relieved now that okay, there's actually allowance for that, that they're actually taking it into consideration, and it's really great. So it makes one actually excited about the future, working on the field, because our lecturers, they emphasize it a lot that geology is a field study. It's the joy is being in the field. So yeah, we appreciate that knowledge.
But I think in your particular case, and sorry, I can't refer to you by name because your safe name is going through the most, and I don't think that's
because I am going through the most. Geology will do that.
No, it does. But yeah, in your particular situation, if you think about the different geological roles, even from an entry perspective, if you walked into a mine and looked at what the different geos do, you've got some geos whose job it is to model. And if you're doing modeling, you're essentially sitting at your computer, right? Bringing in data that's coming out from the field and making it visual. If you're working with if you're like a data scientist geologist whose work is to, take in information and put it on programs like, Acquire or whatever it is, just to be able to collect all the different essays together before you move it on to modelers. That's also something that's very, at your computer. You've also got chemical geologists or geometallurgical geologists, and all those people spend far less time out in the field than your production geos or your exploration geos. So it's just about understanding what are the different entry points that geos have, and if you physically are unable to spend the time required out doing something, then just looking at a different entry point. It's not as easy as just saying I will then reserve myself to being a research geo, because that's also a risk where the number of people that I get sending me emails or LinkedIn's and asking me how do they get started, and they've got a PhD next to their name or an MSc next to their name, there isn't much I can do for that, because entry-level roles are not really meant for people that are that qualified. And I know that we like to talk about, yes, but I'm willing to accept a lower role. But that's not ethical for a company to do, to give you a low pay when you've spent the time and you've got the high level of experience. So what they will end up doing is they will hire someone who's got less knowledge than you, because then they pay them the right work. They give them the right work at the right level and pay them the right amount of money. And then when it comes to work that requires that PhD level, a lot of the time that PhD is required to have experience attached to it. So if you're going to put you in a PhD position, it's normally quite senior, and it's very difficult to put you in that senior role if you can't show me the work you've done, the different projects that you've done that make you right for that particular role. So it's not a train smash, but it's just something to be careful of.
And honors is the ideal level for job search entry.
So honors is the role, or is the level that you will find easiest to find opportunities. However, when you look at at our mine, for example, we've got what we call production geos, and then we've got geotechnicians. So geotechnicians are the geologists that do the work, going out in the field, doing the logging, talking to the samplers to make sure that everything's okay. And then the production geos are doing the modeling work. To be a geotechnician, you don't need an honors. So you could apply to a role at one of Kumba's mines with just a degree, and that entry level would be to be a geotechnician, which is quite heavy work, in that you're doing a lot of the handiwork that's required, and then you start to progress your way up. However, if you get into that role as a geotechnician with just your degree and don't take the time to do your honors while you're there, you won't get promoted to become the production geo, because the requirement to be a production geologist is an honors role. So if you're an individual that is able to study while you work, then you can come out with your degree and find an opportunity that requires your degree, and then just work towards your honors, because you don't want to not progress in life because you're not putting in the time. There also is no train smash with how and when you should do some of these things. I mean, my boss, who's very accomplished, my ex-boss, who was very accomplished, he was a principal mining geologist before he left our company. He's busy with his master's now, and he's 43 or 44 years old, but he's done everything and he keeps progressing. But like I said, he spent that time doing the work, having gotten his honors, doing the work for 15 or so years, and at some stage decided, maybe a master's would be good to add to my list based on some of the work that I'm doing. But it was never a barrier. With that said, you do need to realize that the way the world is moving, we are slowly but surely making it more difficult, where some people will say like a master's is the same value as an honors now because everyone has a master's. But that's not particularly how companies think. It's not as black and white as that. So I wouldn't really say what's the right level of qualification, because it just depends on where you want to start.
Are there bursaries available at Kumba? If so, how do you apply?
When do they come out? They come out in learnerships, internships, and bursaries. They come out every year at different intervals. I think the bursaries should be coming out in the third quarter, possibly. And look, I always lead people to just the address, like our Anglo-American address under opportunities or careers. That's where they normally put it. And I know when I give people that response, it sounds like I'm being dismissive, but that's literally how I found it. I went to the website of literally every mining company I knew, and I went under opportunities, I went under careers, and looked at what do I qualify there, what do I qualify for there, and that's where I found bursaries, that's where I found learnerships, and I could then from there apply. And what I always do on my personal LinkedIn is I do put up these graduate opportunities when they come through in my email, because the company sends them to employees. I do put them up, but if you were going on the site, you would also see it as it came up if you just continuously checked. But I mean, as and when I can, I put it up. The one thing is, don't send the same CV to every single company, because that just says that you are not taking into consideration what exactly the role is asking for. It is not lying when you just accentuate the qualities you have that fit a particular role well. If I'm going for a role that requires presentations and so on, I will obviously talk about my speaking skills and, you know, how much time I spend doing Toastmasters or whatever the case is, or debate teams. I will accentuate that because it feels like a skill that will be useful for the role that's being advertised. If I'm going for an exploration role, I will speak to my experience logging and how much time I spent doing that and how I'm able to model that. But if I'm just sending the same CV, it's not good enough because you're not tailoring you're not selling yourself properly. You're basically just selling the same product to everyone, even though people are asking for different things. So that's not it's not good enough. What information did you wish you knew in your first year in terms of developing yourself as a geologist? That's a tough question. It's a tough question, and the reason why it's a tough question, I think you guys will know, man. You go through almost your whole geology journey trying to figure yourself out. By the time you get to, you know, your third year, you're still thinking, you know, this is my final year. Do I fit in as an exploration geologist? Do I fit in as an environmental geologist, hydrogeologist, or do I see myself working within the mine environment? Over and above that, when I finished my varsity years, I think I'd logged 3 holes in totality. And almost my first 6 months was logging holes. So it felt like I was doing something for the first time, even though, you know, it felt like I had done it before. It just was not the same when you're left to do it yourself and you're given a very short space of time to do it, because everyone's finishing their holes in 3 days, you know, 2 days, and we're talking about 600-meter holes. And, you know, I've got a 250-meter hole that's taking me 1 week, 1.5 weeks. Just because, you know, I'm trying to pick up every single contact, I'm trying to pick up every single layer, and I haven't, you know, practiced this. And I think I was very scared when I started because it felt like, yeah, see, I'm clearly incompetent. But I think that's why it's important to understand that we all have our own journey, and when you start out, you don't start out on the same level as the other geos that have been there. So you'll have work that takes you, you know, 6 to 7 times as long as a competent geo, but that's only because you're still learning. Because, you know, as was expected, as time went by, I became more and more competent and was able to do my holes a lot faster, because now certain things you would see and wouldn't need to go back. You just knew that it worked. Geology also has the risk of paying you rather well, which stops you from being ambitious. Because if you can afford your car and you can afford your house and you can afford to go out, why do you need to stress and, you know, stretch yourself if you feel like your life is comfortable? And that's a very dangerous place to be in. You never want to be comfortable to the point where you feel like what you're doing is enough to get by, because, you know, younger geos will come in and surpass you because they will do what you do but still expand further and try to do more. So don't get comfortable. We're also moving past, I think I'm pretty much testament to that. We're moving past this thing of the length of time you've spent in a particular role gives you the next promotion automatically. That's not the way it works. So if there's 5 of us in a particular setting and one of us is the newest, a lot of companies are starting to look at ambition and direction and contribution and value add as what's required for promotion, and not just the fact that you've been doing something for 5 to 6 years and therefore you're the next in line. You don't build sustainable companies and, you know, successful companies like that. Innovative and, you know, companies that have agility. You need people that are continuously trying to improve. And I think a lot of companies are realizing that. So please, when you do start working, don't walk into that role, learn the basics and think that it's enough. You know, continue to grow, continue to do more. And that's essentially, my job was to say, look, we've got so and so and so as problems. What are the technological solutions that exist? The beauty of it is it's not often that I even have to do like R&R, you know, a lot of research to try and make things happen, because other departments have solved a lot of our problems. One example that I always talk about is we had x-rays for many years, for many decades. It's always been there. You could walk into a hospital and they would x-ray your bone. But it's only in the last decade or so that we've been x-raying core. So if you think of core that you get out of a tray, you put it in a machine, you know, and they've got, you know, machines like Core Scan, which it will rotate the ore, take an x-ray of that and pretty much model every element that you've got there and put it in a 3D space for you to see. And to be able to do that, and I mean, if we just sat here and I talked to you guys about the amazing technology that exists, you would be shocked at just how much is out there that we as geologists need to apply and have not been applying. And for me, it's like a dream come true that my job is just always looking at stuff like that and saying what's next, what's new. Okay, drones are around. How do we use drones as geologists to make our work more functional? And I mean, within our department now, we've got drones that we use for many things. And it's just opportunities keep coming up, as new technology comes. I mean, even, virtual reality. The fact that we have to work on mud piles and put demarcations to show people where to dig, that's very, very old mentality. We go into a place where you want to be able to put digital lines out in the field, and the person that's in a shovel and the person that's standing at the block can either just put on a pair of glasses and see exactly what needs to be loaded out, where it must go, and all of that needs to be seamless. And that's obviously where we are working towards. And again, there is plenty technology, and the idea is just not to accept things as they are, but think about how do we change it by looking at what's possible within mining, but also what's been possible everywhere else. Because virtual reality is a big thing now, but gaming has had it since like I think the 1970s or so.
So Snowtime, did you have that module in university that gave you problems such a way that you almost nearly gave up in geology? And if yes, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's a very funny enough. It's not a geology specific question, it's a university specific question. And what I mean by that is if you sit around any group of geologists from the same university, they all have an idea of what subject you're talking about. If you say there was that one subject that I struggled with, and I don't know if it's tied to a professor or a lecturer or whatever the case is, but I think for us at University of Pretoria, it was called, I think it was GLY 265 or something, or 255, but it was mineralogy. And all we knew was in that second year, it was like a rite of passage. You were going to third year with that module still on your books because everyone was failing it. It was extremely difficult, but also the nature of the marking and how it was done. It was very difficult to, say and, write exactly what that lecturer wanted to see. So I guess that sort of masked it a bit because it was a struggle that everyone had. So you didn't feel like you were a failure or struggling because, it was shared amongst us all. When I did hit the stumbling block of, I think I got 47% in my second year, I was very quick to sign up for the supplementary because, I took the paper and went over it and looked at, okay, what mistakes did I make? And I think also very important, guys, this applies both in university and at work. You need to know how to, I don't want to say play the man because it sounds bad, but you need to know how to have social capital even with your lecturers, because as much as they try to make even the marking process as fair as possible, if your name is there or your student number is there, especially throughout the term before the exam, it does influence how they mark you. So I mean, being courteous and being a good student and attending classes, you will sometimes get marked higher because they know that you've been trying and you've been coming to every lesson, as opposed to if you've been to 2 lessons and are getting something wrong. There's no social capital that you've built with that individual, so they don't give you that opportunity. And I mean, it's even more so when you're doing like presentations where they're actually looking at you and listening to you and they're supposed to mark you. It's as simple as if people like you, it's a lot easier for you to get stuff done. And that's not nice, but it's the way the world works.
So another question is, a lot of the time when you apply for these graduate programs, they take preference to locals. For example, near the mine, would you advise moving closer to those areas?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because I've seen people who, they sift through their family tree to try to find family that's close to the mine. And then they fabricate, where they stay, to say I'm maybe staying with my aunt who stays in Katu or whatever the case is. When the opportunities come from a lot of the head offices, they are not specific to particular areas. But obviously, if it's coming from like the platinum leg of Anglo-American, it's going to be from the Northwest or Limpopo. If it's coming from the iron leg, it's going to come, from the Northern Cape. But there are opportunities that don't come with that geological limitation. And I think you guys also mustn't underestimate the opportunities that come from, you know, groups like GSSA or SACNASP, you know, as entry-level opportunities that at least give you something to spring off of. Because I think it's always good to be making tough decisions and looking for opportunities while you have something that's sustaining you. So I think if you're struggling to place yourself, look for these companies that are not area specific, like your CSIRs as well. There's a lot of companies, so there's no such thing within Joburg companies like Johannesburg. I don't know about Cape Town, but like Johannesburg, because it's a metropolitan, a lot of the opportunities that come from the companies where the head office is there don't say that you have to live in that area. It's only when you're going specifically to the mines. And remember, they're not doing that out of spite. You need a social license to operate. You need the community to give you permission to operate there. And the only way to do that is to have a minimum number of people that are from that community that get opportunities at every level, not just junior levels, not just senior levels. But yes, if you do have family close to there, it does make your life a little bit easier. But also remember, because of how impoverished a lot of these communities are, don't let that slip you by when they say preference will be given to locals, because more often than not, there are no locals who have that particular skill that they're asking for.
The question says, what was your work day like when you first moved in as an entry-level geologist? Meaning the time you're out of work, knock-off time you spent in the field. Yeah, asking like, did the mine provide accommodation, transport, and lastly, is a driver's license compulsory as a geologist?
A driver's license is very important. It's very important to be mobile. However, I wouldn't say that it's compulsory. We have a geo on site now who's a graduate that doesn't have a driver's license, so she normally drives out with the team, because you don't normally go out to the pit alone. You know, even for safety reasons, it's just good to have other people there. So you're not always the one that's driving. However, it does limit what you can do on your own if you don't have a driver's license. So if we've gone out to the field and we've logged and I'm finished and you're not and I'm driving, you know, your samples are going to be left out there undone because I need to get back to the office or whatever the case is. But also in terms of how quickly you can go out, if you have to wait for when someone's going, it's an inconvenience, because like I said, it's quite a long drive to get into the pit. In terms of my first role, I mean, we used to get to the mine at, I think, 6:30 for 7, and we'd get home at about 5 o'clock. But it differs. It depends on the mine you're on. Some people work shifts, so they can work 6 to 6, and will maybe have days off, especially like you're underground, because, you know, it's not easy to just go underground. You know, there's like one transport that takes everyone to the particular area, and then everyone must leave at the same time. So you end up spending most of your time underground. But I think definitely when you're entry level, your workload is a lot because you're trying to learn everything. You're trying to be like a sponge and, you know, just consume everything that's being taught to you. So it's very tough, and you need to be mentally prepared to spend that first 4 to 6 months, you know, just showing that you're there to learn, you're there to do the work, because you also don't want to be one of those people that you know, gives up very early on, because then opportunities will stop coming, because people won't give you work if it looks like the little they're giving you is not progressing. It's only when it looks like you've got what you've been given under control that more complex work streams start coming your way. But yeah, you don't want to spend 2 to 3 years doing the same thing because they feel like you're still not competent doing it. And the only way to do that is to exhaust yourself and work more than you used to, just to make sure that you've got everything under control. Of course, in a way that is healthy for your mental.
I'm a first year student. What tips and advice can you give to me as a first year? Online learning has its pros and cons, and it can be difficult.
Yeah, look, you guys are genuinely, I don't know if the word is unlucky, but I think what you have to go through right now, it's very difficult, because I think the learning experience, the whole university experience, what made it amazing or what makes it amazing is the camaraderie, getting to know people, and it's part and parcel of the degree. It's just that interaction that university gives you. So I think what's happened over the last 2 years and people having to be home. Yeah, it's not good. It's not nice, and I think also it stops you from having that hands-on opportunity, to organize like trips as well, because most of us in mines are not allowing any people on because we're trying to protect our employees, protect outsiders. So the practical experience which we'd usually be able to offer is not quite there. But I think my advice for any first year, which is the same advice that I think most lecturers tell you, is please just decide if this is what you want to do. Please decide if geology is what you want to do, because when that switch flicks in your head and you decide that you want to be a geologist, your work ethic and your enthusiasm, it changes altogether. But I think while you're still in that position where, and I'm not saying this is true for you, but if you are in that position where you're still not quite sure if this is where you want to be, it shows in your energy, it shows in your application. So yeah, I think just decide what you want for yourself, and if it truly is geology, you start putting forward the effort. Yeah, look, I think as a wrap up, okay, I think firstly, just for the question that came in just now, in terms of whether or not it's important for you to have been on a mine or not, it's not to say that it's the most important thing, but it's to say that if it's there, it's kind of nice. Think of it from even like in the dating pool. There we all have a few bare minimums that we look for in a potential partner, but there's always those added bonuses that when you see it, it's like, oh, and you can sing, or and you can dance. Whatever the case is, mines are the same, or workplaces are the same, where we'll have our minimum requirements, but if you walk in and you say, yes, and I did 1 year vocational work at so and so mine, which is the same commodity as you, it's added. It's an added bonus. But I also don't think that there's pressure on an incoming geologist to have all of that sorted out and figured out. Think about your brands, think about who you are as an individual, what sets you apart from the next geologist, because that's all you have when it comes time to sell yourself and say why you deserve to be in certain positions. And this isn't just for entry level, this is for when you want to proceed in your career. It's your brand that's going to carry you through, and your brand is everything, guys. Your brand includes your social media presence. It includes your email address. If you send an email and the email address is hotblonde@gmail.com, all of that reflects on your brand and what kind of individual you are. When you're competing with people who are just professional in every aspect, and I mean that level of professionalism is easy to do because it's administrative stuff. It's not even about how well you speak. It's about giving yourself the best possible opportunity up to the point where you need to maybe verbally express yourself or do the actual work. But why start limiting yourself from things that are easy to control, like having an email address that makes sense, like having a social media presence that makes sense. And I'm not saying don't go out and have fun on your Instagram or your Facebook, but if that's the case, make sure that your LinkedIn profile, as an example, is appropriate and is there. Because it's not that HR uses the social media stuff that you put on your CV, is that they go over and above to try to find out more about you to see if you'd be a good fit. Because remember, when there's 10 CVs on my table and all of them make sense, and I'm trying to see over and above, who do I look like would be a good fit for the team, I start to use other sources now, like Googling your name. And when I Google your name, your Instagram pops up, your Facebook pops up. And if the first image that pops up is, hate speech or whatever the case is, then you've automatically removed yourself from that opportunity. And don't underestimate how easy it is to find out more information about you guys, especially in this day and age. Almost all of you, if you've got your name and surname, someone can go into social media and find out a little bit more about you. And if that stuff is not good for your profile, then that's not good. And to circumvent that, just put together a simple LinkedIn page. That way, because if I'm looking to find out more about you professionally, if LinkedIn is also one of the options, then I'll go to LinkedIn. I don't need to go to your Instagram or Twitter account or whatever the case is.